John 6:48. Ego sum panis vitae. I am the bread of life. I'm going to borrow some words for this verse from the great Baptist preacher of the 19th century, Charles Spurgeon, and say that this is what we might call a body of divinity in miniature. That is to say, these four words could spur on, maybe should spur on, a whole lifetime of reflection. And by the way, we might note, just in favor of our Latin translation here, that what the Greek original takes 6 words to express only takes 4 in the Latin language, and one of them, strictly speaking, is unnecessary. We could get rid of ego, and the sentence would mean the same thing. We could cut in half the number of words over our Greek friends here. But it's not a competition, of course. It's not a competition because Latin would win. However, there are still a few things that we can say here. First of all, we want to note that this is a repetition of what Jesus says in John 6:35, that is earlier in the chapter. And I don't know about you, but when Jesus says something twice, it's a sign to me that I ought to pay close attention to what he means and to why he's repeating himself. In this particular verse, though, to leave the interpretation to the experts and just focus on the words themselves, we have the first person singular of the Latin verb esse, to be. It might be worth going through all these again. Sum, I am. Es, you are. Est, he, she, or it is. Sumus, we are. Estis, you all, plural, are. And sunt. Esse is probably just about the most common verb in the Latin language, but it's also highly irregular, as you can see from this paradigm here. So it's never a bad idea to review all those forms just in case you still feel a bit shaky about them. Although I think what happens with most Latin learners is you see them so frequently that this is among the very first verbs that you completely master without even really thinking about it. Probably you only had to study this paradigm a few times at the beginning before it became second nature to you and not even something that you had to consult, because reading any kind of Latin text, even if it's just artificial sentences composed by the modern author of a Latin textbook, every book containing a lot of sentences in Latin is going to have tons and tons and tons of forms of this verb that you're going to see. So again, we talked just in the last verse about how important a word vita is in the Gospel of John, and panis too has important resonances with the feeding of the 5,000 and the idea of sustenance, that which sustains vita, all throughout this discourse. As I said earlier, we could spend a lifetime meditating on the meaning of these words and not exhaust the subject. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one more time, as we've said many times in this Gospel of John, that ego sum, with this, strictly speaking, unnecessary but very prominent pronoun here, first person pronoun. This harks back to the book of Exodus, the beginning of the book of Exodus, when God tells Moses, this is how you should tell the people of Israel who I am. I am that I am. Ego sum, ego eimi in Greek. Thus, Jesus is making a very powerful and striking claim about his identity here, which of course causes major significant reactions wherever he goes, particularly here and in some other places where he's dealing with a hostile audience.